Nous allons maintenant demander au professeur Holm, en nous priant de... sorry for the delay. Nous avons encore about 30 minutes and then we'll rush to lunch. Je vais présenter brièvement le professeur Holm, qui est l'un des rares spécialistes mondiaux de ce phénomène extraordinaire, qui est l'une des seules langues thaï écrite non pas dans un alphabet dérivé de l'écriture indienne, comme le reste des langues non vietnamiennes d'Asie du Sud-Est, à peu près, mais dans un système qui se rapproche, enfin, il va nous dire son avis à ce sujet, qui se rapproche beaucoup du nom vietnamien. Donc il s'agit de la minorité, qui est en même temps l'une des plus fortes minorités de Chine, les Chuang, qui sont une vingtaine de millions de personnes parlant un réseau de langue thaï et qui ont utilisé pendant très longtemps l'équivalent d'un démotique. Professor Holmes.
Thank you. I'll try to be quick because, and I'm very sorry not to be speaking in French or Japanese. Anyway, I'll try to be quick because everybody will be starting to get hungry. My topic is somewhat related to that of Philippe Papin, which is on Chernon. This is on the other side of the border, but also relates to scripts of the Tai-speaking peoples in the northern part of Vietnam, mostly. I have conducted field work, and actually there are quite a number of different so-called minority groups in both China and Vietnam, not just along the border, but also in the provinces in China of Guangxi and Guizhou and Guangdong and Yunnan and Hunan and so forth and so on, who use the Chinese script to write their own language. So this is actually a very common kind of borrowed script. What I've done with the Zhuang script, the Zhuang, by the way, are China's most populous minority with a population currently of some 17 million. So this is not a very small number. And on the other side of the border, the Dai are Vietnam's largest minority with a population of something like 1.5 million. So these are very large groups of minorities in terms of population. My approach to these questions has been quite different from library research. I have gone out into the field and recorded recitations of manuscripts which are still in use. So this generates a very large amount of data. So far, I've covered 65 locations, or rather traditional manuscripts from 65 locations on both sides of the border. What I'll be looking at here is three different modes of cultural transmission from one generation to the next, which are all instantiated in such scripts. The first of these is performative literacy, which is found among male practitioners in Guangxi, Yunnan, Guizhou, and other provinces. The second is a kind of hyper-literate transmission that is found among the Dai in the northern part of Vietnam and also in the southwestern part of Guangxi near the Vietnam border. What is particularly interesting, and particularly in view of the material that was shown by Professor Papin's talk, is there are Dai, Viet, and Chinese dictionaries which are in use by these practitioners in these locations. And the third form, finally, is that which is found in the transmission of the knowledge about how to read and sing songbooks in traditional song markets, which are found pretty much all over the southern part of China. Survey area, the survey that I conducted previously and wrote up in my book that published in 2013 are these. You can see that they're rather concentrated in the western part of Guangxi, but there are also some locations in Guizhou, Yunnan, and also Vietnam. I compared these with the dialect data, which is available for Zhuang, and also dialect data available for Bouye and other languages. The Chinese government conducted surveys starting in the 1950s and again in the 1980s, and these are the survey points. The survey covered a number of different languages: Northern Zhuang, Southern Zhuang, Yunnan, Nung, and then other branches of the Tai language family, such as Maonan, Mulam, and so forth and so on, all of which use Zhuang as a ritual language. And then in other provinces, such as Guizhou, there are Bouye and so forth and so on. Recently, I've expanded the survey down into northern part of Vietnam, covering both Dai and Nung. Dai and Nung are very different kinds of scripts, by the way. The Dai are the people who are indigenous to the northeastern provinces in Vietnam, and they have been there according to data from DNA surveys and that kind of thing for at least 3,000 years, if not longer. And the Nung have come down from China, mostly during the last 500 years or so. They have very different scripts. The Nung brought their scripts with them when they migrated down from Guizhou and Guangxi and other provinces. So very different. Now, religious practitioners I surveyed included the Mogong, who are vernacular priests who recite in Zhuang, and then ritual masters that recite partly in Chinese and partly in Zhuang, Taoists of the so-called Maoshan style, and so forth. And then in Vietnam also there are Put and Tan shamanic ritualists, primarily of the Dai, but also Nung ethnicity. I also looked at female ritual specialists. Most of those on the preceding slide are male exclusively. But there are also female Put and Ten practitioners. We'll see some pictures of those a little later. There are other traditional owners, such as owners of traditional song texts. These are not ordained priests, so they are not ritual specialists, but rather common people. The survey methodology involved putting fieldwork at the center and then ascertaining on the spot in the villages what the meaning and pronunciation of each word in the text was. This was a very laborious procedure for each of these texts. The method of analysis was one which basically transcended standardized approaches, both to grammatology and also the study of dialects. Basically, I didn't pay too much attention to all of the voluminous literature in the Chinese tradition about the liushu, the 6 ways of writing characters. A lot of what we found in the field was rather different. We were concerned primarily because lots of the dialects were previously unrecorded, not to undertake any premature aggregation of data, in other words, to standardize in anywhere. So, whoops. The first location I am going to show you is that of Donglan, located here. From the air, it looks like this. The mottled look from the air is what looks like this on the ground. These are remote localities, and the Mogong in these localities possess manuscripts which look like Chinese, except that they are written in the right in columns. Most of the Chinese the characters here are standard Chinese characters rather than Zhuang inventions. Probably about at least 80%. So you would start to think that you can read this if you can read Chinese, but you don't get very far. Here is another example of the same text. And we find that these practitioners also have scrolls, which look very much like Chinese, sacred scrolls of the kind that you hang up behind an altar. We can see pictures here of masked practitioners and climbing a ladder of swords and this kind of thing. And we would think probably that we are very comfortably within the Chinese cultural area. Here we have also the Bridge of Sorrows and all sorts of other things, but we also notice the flowers here, which are the souls of unborn children. So this is kind of Chinese, but there is also some cultural contents here, which are not standard Chinese, or rather not orthodox in the orthodox Chinese cultural tradition. What's more, the rituals practiced by these Mogong include buffalo sacrifice. Now, buffalo sacrifice is not a Chinese tradition. The Chinese government, imperial governments before the present government, have been trying for many, many centuries to stamp out buffalo sacrifice in the southern provinces in China. The ritual protocol itself comes from India and is not part of the Chinese tradition. So we have here also a Chinese script being used in rituals, the ritual purpose of which is fundamentally non-Chinese. The second place we're going to look at is the Tianyang-Bama border region. This is not very far from Donglan, only about 60 kilometers, but it's a different cultural region. It's also karst area, so it's rather remote and hard to get to. And we find here that rituals are they slightly different and slightly more Chinese kind of style. We see here a very typical Chinese ritual mat shed of the kind that you could find in village-level rituals pretty much anywhere. And lo and behold, it looks as if we have behind the altar the three pure ones of Taoist ritual. And indeed they are the three pure ones guarding the altar. So we are comfortably here within a Chinese tradition. The ritual offerings are also Chinese style. And we see here also the chaoban, the imperial audience boards used by Taoist priests. This is all comfortably Chinese. The priests themselves look as if they are a little bit different from Taoist priests found elsewhere in China. But nevertheless, we find here also the Linghong Fan, the flag which is used to attract the soul, either of the dead person or of other unseen spirit entities. So this also is Chinese. And we have gongs, drum, cymbals, very much like regular Taoist rituals. We have ritual texts which look like this, which are again set out in typical Chinese fashion with typical Chinese punctuation running in columns from right to left, so forth and so on. And this is actually a rather beautiful hand, slightly influenced by 18th century renovation of the Li Su variety of the script. You can see a few characters there which are not standard Chinese, but it's mostly standard Chinese characters. Some of the manuscripts are not very old at all. They have been copied in the 1980s, 1990s, or even more recently. But they're still in thread-bound volumes, reading in the same traditional fashion. The ritual itself, however, is a non-Chinese ritual which is designed to recall the souls of the rice crop. And this is a non-Chinese Tai tile ritual of the kind that you can also find in Thailand. When your rice crop does not thrive, when there are it is attacked by weevils, or when you have rust on the rice crop and that kind of thing, you conduct a ritual for it. Here you see rice plants in little bowls set out in an array, and Taoist priests threading through this maze in order to, first of all, locate the lost souls of the ailing, sick rice crop, and then to bring the rice souls back to the rice field and reinstall them in the rice crop. So this is not a Chinese ritual. The Chinese do not do this. It is not Orthodox Chinese culture whatsoever. It is a recalling lost souls, jiaohun type of ritual. Now, in that particular tradition, what happens with the transmission is the priests do not actually read from their texts. What they do is perform the act of reading the texts. Now, the way this happens is that when small boys, have priests in the family, in the village, they go along with their grandfathers or their fathers to numerous rituals when they are small. And if they haven't taken interest in this, they gradually absorb into their bellies, as the Chinese say, the way in which the sacred texts are intended to be recited. Now, when they go to school and they learn how to write and how to read, they then, some years later, transcribe their own copies of the ritual texts. But the transmission of the two, that is to say the recitation and the writing or transcribing of the ritual texts, take place at two very different times and separately. So there are discrepancies between the recitation and the way what is actually written on the page, which have grown up over many, many centuries. This particular tradition goes back at least to the time of the Sui Tang transition, in other words, about 1700 years ago. We can tell this because most of the readings of the Chinese character part of these texts corresponds quite closely to early Middle Chinese. And this is something that can be demonstrated. There are other additional levels which have been introduced at more recent times, but the basic bedrock of this tradition dates from that time. Now, the next type is a hyper-literate transition among the Dai in Lungzhou County in the southwest, which is here. And the Dai priests, the 10, by the way, tradition is one which is a Buddhist-type shamanic tradition in which rituals are structured as journeys up into the sky. Again, this is not part of any Chinese tradition, but something rather which comes from Brahmanic and Vedic ritual templates from approximately 2,000 years ago to the Red River Valley in the northern part of what is now Vietnam. So, and the priests look like this, and they have 3-string or 2-string lutes, and they have ritual texts, and you can see them actually reading from their texts in the this particular ritual. There are male performers, there are also female performers. We have sets of little pewter bells which are shaken in order to mimic the sound of horses' hooves going up to the sky. The texts look like this. Again, they're Chinese, they're thread-bound volumes, they're read in columns. Most of the characters are recognizably Chinese, and yet they're written, you can see a number of graphs here which are a little different, but generally speaking, the people who wrote these manuscripts had a very, very accomplished hand. In other words, they were good calligraphers. There are some other modern texts which have been transcribed very, very recently. These are from only about 10 years ago or so. And there's no particular problem with introducing Arabic numerals or anything like that. That's certainly on the table of contents. That's no problem. Again, the basic layout of these texts is the same. The 10 also perform individual household rites for sick children and that kind of thing. Again, these are not non-Chinese rituals, even if the texts are written primarily in Chinese characters. Again, the mechanism is to use the 3-string or 2-string lute. This is called the gading in the Dai language. It's related to the lute of Indra, and it's a mechanism for shamanic ascent, which also comes from India, rather than something which comes from anywhere locally. Here we look over the shoulder there. Yes, indeed, it is the kind of text that we've just seen. Here the 10 has donned his garb for the journey up to the sky. We have standard issue Taoist style books of charms and imprecations, but we also have something else, which is dictionaries of Dai, the Dai, Chernong Dai, which are in Dai and in Vietnamese and in Chinese. They're 3-way, and there are a number of different varieties to this. One starts with Dai entries, one starts with Chinese, and so forth and so on. These types of reference works, by the way, mean that the Dai script is one which is basically unified or has a very high degree of standardization for a vernacular script over a very, very wide area. Now, the third variety of transmission, I should say something before this. The ten transmission comes from both a father and a mother teacher down to the second of the younger generation. Women do not perform the act of reading texts in public. However, what they get from their father teacher is a complete transmission of all of the necessary recitations, which they then memorize. And women can also read the texts, or it seems as if they can. It's just that they do not do so as a public act the way that the men do. The recitations in this tradition follow the text. So there is no bifurcation of recitation and the text as written. And when you ask 10 priests, how do you read that character? Or what does that particular character mean? They can usually tell you the answer. So it's a highly literate kind of transmission in the way that we would recognize as literate. Quite unlike the kind of thing that you get in Guangxi among the Mogung practitioners. Now, the third variety is one which is based on family transmission from father to son, and it is one which is confined to males. Females or young girls who are interested also learn the repertoire of traditional song that is native to that particular area, but they do not themselves read the songbooks. The males possess the songbooks, they transcribe their own, and they use them in performance as a crib when they forget the song lyrics. The women have slightly better memories and do not have to rely on reading cribs the way that the men do. This is a song festival. Song festivals are found all over Guangxi. They were formerly found all over the southern part of China. They're called song markets, 歌序 in Chinese. And they're markets because young boys and girls of marriageable age sing antiphonally, take an interest in each other, and the traditional way that people in the Zhuang nationality got married or found their marriage partners was not by arrangement from their parents in Chinese style, but rather was quite direct competition in antiphonal singing. So this is a very, very crucial cultural nexus. If you could not sing in the traditional style any time before the 1980s, that meant that your chances of finding a nice marriage partner were going to be very, very considerably less, and you would be regarded as an uncultured person. These are just pictures of the state-sponsored 歌序 from a particular locality. The singers in these traditional song markets gather in groups, first of all, and then eventually in smaller groups of typically 2 males and 2 females, with the men holding little songbooks you'll notice that most of these people are now in their 40s. Younger generations no longer have to rely on the traditional song traditions in order to find marriage partners. They simply go to the cities. So it's a little different. These booklets are rather small, but they nevertheless, they are used in performance. The point of the way that they are written, the type of script that is used, and so forth and so on, is that it's easy to read, it's easy to consult, and it's used in order to sing. So it is not the same way that ritual manuscripts are designed as a basis for ritual recitation. Here we have a group of 2 and 2. Songbooks look like this. Typically they're rather small, sometimes very thin. They fit up a sleeve in a traditional gown, so they're mostly designed with that in mind. Sometimes one doesn't have to write out the whole line if the lines are repetitive, so simply leave them out. It's not a sacred text, so you don't have to do everything according to anybody's set of rules. Sometimes in modern times we find that you use durable paper from cardboard boxes and that kind of thing, but the binding nevertheless is traditional binding. This is a tradition which has been going on for a very, very long time actually throughout the Chinese cultural area, north and south. But of traditional songbooks, this is a quotation from an 18th century source, Guangdong Xinyu, which describes how the songbooks are piled up as votive offerings in a temple, rather a cave devoted to the worship of Liu Sanmei, who is the patron deity, as it were, of this kind of song culture. In the interests of time, I will leave out all of this detail about various, the geographic distribution of Dai scripts to used for words commonly found in manuscripts. Actually, you can see just from this one that there is quite a lot of commonality among all of these different instances from Gaobang and Laksun and Babe, and so these are locations quite a long way from each other, and yet the script is one that can be read throughout this whole area, which spans about 5 northern Vietnamese provinces. So we can see that in certain cases, there is absolute uniformity in the way that words are written in this particular script. There's a lot of this. The percentage similarity is something that we can document on the basis of our survey. So we find, in comparison with marriage songs in Gaobang, we have percentage similarity of 63, which is a little low, but all of the other percentages are up in the 80s, 70s, the highest up in 97, which is very, very high. What we find with the Zhuang script, however, is percentages maybe 80 at the highest, and usually about 50 between different localities. And we'll leave all of this. And that's just a bibliography. So thank you.